I wanted to start my talk today with a couple of thoughts, and then I'll perhaps set the scene a little bit about South Australia, and then talk about a few of the case studies of some work we've been doing to optimise water and wastewater supply in South Australia. But the first thought that I wanted to share with you was actually some words that were written by an Australian poet by the name of Dorothy McKellar in 1908. And the poem is called My Country, and it starts off by saying, "I love a sunburnt country, a land of drought and flooding rains." And I think when you think about the water industry in Australia, there's never been truer words written than those. The other thought that occurs to me, and I think it ties on very well from the words that, or the presentation that Art just gave, is that necessity is the mother of innovation. Where there's a driving need, we're very good as a society and as an industry at finding new ways of doing things and solving problems. And I'm sure that the challenges that Art has just presented will be challenges that we will grab and that we will solve in the coming years or days and years and weeks and decades. And the third thought that occurred to me while I was listening to Art is that it took me back to the millennium drought that we had in Australia in the early 2000s, where we had major cities, including the one that I live in Adelaide, that were very, very close to running out of water. And we find ourselves back in that position in many places in Australia at the moment. And back then people used to say, we have a water shortage. Well, we don't have a water shortage. My very simple knowledge of the water cycle suggests to me that there's the same amount of water in the world today as there was 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago, and there will be the same amount of water in another 100 years. The problem is, it's just not where it always was, and it's not always in a condition that we can use cost effectively. So that's the challenge that we've got as an industry. They're the things that we're trying to face, or the challenges that we're facing. And I'm sure that we're up for it. So South Australia, it's obviously central southern part of Australia, and it's a little bit of some of the statistics. We have a population of about 1.7 million people. The capital is Adelaide, my hometown. An area of 984,000 square kilometres, and Google's a wonderful thing. I Googled the size of New Zealand this morning, and that's actually about 4 times the size of New Zealand. We have around 27,000 kilometres of water main. We distribute around 200 gigalitres of water each year. Our Australian Water Quality Centre undertakes about 300,000 water quality tests each year, and we distribute all of those 200 gigalitres in accordance with the Australian Drinking Water Quality Guidelines. On the wastewater side of things, about 9,000 kilometres of sewer, 370 kilometres of recycled water main, and we recycle, on average, about 35% of all of our wastewater that's produced. There's a nice picture of the River Murray, which is one of our main water sources. So the water issues that we've faced in South Australia that have driven some of the innovation that I'll talk about in the 3 case studies in a little while. It's a very dry and very variable climate. You can see the picture there of one of our summer days last year, showing Adelaide's maximum temperature of 45 degrees, and the heat map showing the temperature across the country. 45 is not actually the hottest day we have on record. We've had one hotter since then. It was about 47 or nearly 48 degrees. So it is a very dry and variable climate, and the number of heat waves that we are experiencing each year is certainly increasing. So climate change is very real. We have a diverse range of water sources. The River Murray is on most occasions our main water source. It's about 80 kilometres from Adelaide, and we need to pump water over the top of the Mount Lofty Ranges. We also use natural catchments in the Mount Lofty Ranges for a large portion of our water supply. Desalination, we have a major desalination plant that was built in the Millennium Drought. Groundwater is also a source of water for a number of our regional centres. And as I said, we recycle about 32% of our wastewater. One of the issues I think that we will face as an industry as we go forward is the community resistance to direct potable reuse, and it's a challenge that we've faced before. It's a mix that the technology is certainly there. Whilst we're not doing that at the moment in Australia, I'm sure it will be something that will happen within the next decade. On the broader scale, challenges for or over-allocation of water in some catchments is a challenge for us, and certainly the competing interests of industry and community and the environment is a major challenge. What we recognised a number of years ago, really through the Millennium Drought, is that without a healthy environment and without healthy river flows that keep the environment healthy, then you don't have good quality water and you don't have communities that can thrive. So balancing that mix between the environment and community use of water is a major challenge for us in South Australia, and Australia indeed. We also sit at the end of two of the major water systems in Australia. So the Murray-Darling Basin system that stretches from Queensland up in the north down to Adelaide, and also the Great Artesian Basin that takes water from the far north of Queensland into groundwater reserves in the centre of Australia. So we sit right at the end of those two water systems, so we get what's left over after the eastern states have used their water, and it's in variable levels of quality. Overlay on top of that a national electricity grid and some fairly significant increases in electricity prices. So that outlines the challenges. The diagrams there really, you don't need to look at the details, but the red areas are the areas that have under 200 millimetres of rainfall. So it gives you an idea of how much of the state of South Australia is really in a very dire position in terms of natural water. And to show you the flip side, that's the Kullamurra waterhole in the far north. The shot on the left-hand side is in 2004, so in the middle of the Millennium Drought, and the shot on the right-hand side is 2010. So it shows you how quickly things can change. As I said, there's the same amount of water in the world this year as there was last year and will be next year. It's just not always in the place you want it at the time you want it. I touched on the Murray-Darling Basin system before, and as I said, that crosses 4 jurisdictions effectively: Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and South Australia. And I guess if nothing else, the Millennium Drought really showed us in Australia that without effective cross-jurisdictional management of water, the country was in a lot of trouble. And what that meant is that we had to establish some very strong ties between government, industry and our research organisations. And that's really, I guess, the main topic of my talk today, is to reinforce to all of you how important it is for water management to have the 3 levels of our water industry working effectively together, and to put in place those connections and partnerships, because when you're trying to manage water in a country the size of Australia across all those different government levels, then having those strong connections between government, industry and research is really critical. We put in place through the Murray-Darling Basin Association, we put in place the Murray-Darling Agreement, or the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. It is in operation today, so 10 or or more years since that was originally put in place, and it effectively manages the water split between New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and the environment. And it does recognise the comment I made before that without effective use of water in the environment, then you don't have a healthy river system. And if you don't have a healthy river system, you don't have a good irrigation business, you don't have strong communities, and cities like Adelaide really struggle in terms of water quality. So that was a huge step for us back in the early 2000s. We're at the point where it is about to be tested again, largely between the early 2000s and now. We've been in a reasonably good position in the Murray-Darling Basin system in terms of water supply, but it is getting tight again. We've had 2 years of below average rainfall, and in many parts of New South Wales and Victoria and southern Queensland, it's a lot longer than 2 years. It's probably now in the order of 5 to 7 years of almost no rainfall. So we are at the point where the basin plan is going to be stretched again, and it will really test that theory that I had before about strong collaboration between government, industry and research. So to show you a little bit about how our supply sources have changed over that period from about 2005 through to now, and how we expect that to progress into the future. The large part of the pie chart there is rivers, reservoirs and aquifers, and you can see back in 2005 that was about 75% of our water supply. Importantly, the light green section of the pie chart there is called water restrictions, and the part you'll notice, I think, is that as we look ahead to 2050, there's no water restrictions. So we really are backing ourselves across all those levels of the industry to be innovative, to meet the demand increases that you can see in the size of the increase in the size of the pie chart there, and to not impose water restrictions on our communities, because what we know is that if you restrict supply of water, then that is an economic handbrake to the community, and we saw our economy, our gross state product go backwards through the Millennium Drought, and it's not a position that we as a society want to be in again. We also, you'll also notice that there is a significant increase in the amount of recycled water and wastewater recycling that will build into our water supply system in the coming decades. And we also, as I mentioned before, constructed a 100 gigalitre per year desalination plant, and at the moment there are no plans to increase the size of that desalination plant. We do project that it will supply our water through to 2050 or thereabouts. But the real takeaways from that chart are that no water restrictions going forward, and significant increase in the amount of recycled water that we will use as a society. So what have all those challenges meant for us as an industry in South Australia? Rainwater harvesting and managed aquifer recharge has been a key component of how we've set ourselves about meeting those challenges. Local, small-scale wastewater treatment and reuse is also a key. Slowly moving away from the days of large, centralised wastewater systems to more local systems, and I did note that's very, very similar to the thoughts that Art was sharing. Energy management and data analytics has been a huge component, and one of the case studies that I will talk about will elaborate on that a little bit more. Irrigation efficiency, looking very closely at our irrigation systems and making sure that farmers are irrigating at the right time with the right soil moisture content has also been a big push for us. Water quality monitoring and response. Water supply optimisation is another case study that I will talk about in a little while. And again, I've touched on the policy frameworks that are really necessary to make sure that we get that cross-jurisdictional collaboration. You know, we unite pretty well as a country when we play cricket against New Zealand and those sorts of things. We don't always unite that well within our own country. It does take strong government to make sure that our states are working together collaboratively and that we're setting a scene for industry and for our research bodies that can help meet the challenges as we go forward. So the case studies. Before I go to those, just a little bit about South Australia. I've touched on the 1.7 million people. SA Water Corporation that I worked for has a revenue of about last year it was about $1.5 billion. We have 1,500 people that work for SA Water, but more importantly, I think, is if you look at the supply chain that supports SA Water every day of the year, so 365 and a quarter days of the year, we supply water and wastewater services to the community of South Australia. But if you look at the number of people that are actively involved in providing services to SA Water, it would be a number of between 4,000 and 5,000 people on any one day. So we are largely an outsourced organisation, and that really does mean that we need those collaborative connections in place. And we also have about $14 billion worth of assets. So the first of the three case studies that I wanted to talk about is what we call our zero-cost energy future. This is an exercise that focuses on a number of things, but electricity price has been a major cost to SA Water. Last year we spent $82 million on electricity, and our plan is to get us to the point where we will have zero net electricity cost by about the end of next year. It's a very ambitious plan. It makes me feel very nervous, but unless you set yourself a stretch target, then you won't push yourself and you won't achieve the best possible outcome. So this graph gives you an idea of a typical day in South Australia. We've got the figure there of 60 million in electricity costs. That's about our average cost. Last year was a very dry year and we spent a lot more money on pumping water from the Murray. But what you can see there is that typically through the day the electricity price will tick along at around $100 a megawatt hour. But it's not uncommon to get spikes of up to 2,000 or 2,500. And on peak days through the summer, we can see those spikes move from $60 a megawatt hour to about $14,000 a megawatt hour in very short periods of time. So when you're running large pumping systems, electricity costs of $14,000 a megawatt hour, you chew up your available electricity budget very, very quickly. So we set ourselves the plan of moving from really from energy procurement. So in other words, setting up a deal with the electricity retailers to buy electricity at a guaranteed price to energy management. So effectively managing our own risks. And the zero cost energy future is actually built around seven key initiatives. And they are, firstly, demand response. What we know with our system is that a tank is actually as good as a battery. So that if you can fill your tanks when electricity price is low and empty them when the price is high, then that's as good as a battery. Biogas generation is a key platform for us. Our two major wastewater treatment plants in metropolitan Adelaide, the Bolivar plant and the Glenelg plant, are now almost completely self-sufficient. Bolivar, I think, runs at about 93% and Glenelg runs at about 87%. Bolivar with the right set of conditions actually puts electricity back into the grid that we get money for. So biogas generation and efficient digestion and energy generation at our wastewater treatment plants is a key platform of our zero-cost energy future. Backup diesel. We realised that we have multiple diesel generators at sites right across our network, and for the large part of the time they sit there and aren't used. We've also worked out that there's a trigger point that electricity price hits when those generators are actually cost effective to run. So incorporating those into the operating system is on a more regular basis is part of our zero cost energy future. And the last two are really the part that we are most involved in at the moment, and that is solar PV and energy storage. So we are in the process of installing 153 megawatts of solar generation at 70 sites across the state. That's up to 70 sites. To put that into context, that's about 500,000 solar panels that need to be installed between now and the end of next year. Coupled with that is 35 megawatts of battery storage. So couples with the tank analogy that I was talking about before. The statistics are interesting, but that's an investment of around $390 million with a payback period of about 5.5 to 6 years. The part that really makes it interesting is if you think about those 70 sites and you think about an electron that is generated from a solar panel. When that electron's generated, you can do one of three things with it. You can use it in a pump that, or the facility that the site is, the panels are located alongside. You can put it into the battery and store it and use it later on, or you can put it back into the grid and the retailers will pay you some money for it. So the real question is, how do you decide what to do with that electron? Because overlaying all of that is the need to supply water and wastewater services to our customers as well. And one of the things we've started doing is looking very closely and working very closely with the Bureau of Meteorology. So we're very, very interested in cloud cover forecasting. In fact, we've had some of our really smart data scientists at home pulling apart their rooftop solar systems and looking at the inverters that usually their parents have got mounted on the wall, and looking at the generation patterns for those solar systems, and then going to the Bureau of Meteorology and taking those days when they've got the generation patterns and looking at the cloud cover forecasts and starting to write algorithms that look at cloud cover forecasts from the BOM and projecting what sort of electricity generation we're going to get at our 70 sites across the state. That's just exhausted some extent of the knowledge of how those very smart people do that. But it's an amazing piece of technology, and we're trusting our young people a lot. But that data analytics and data science is a key platform for making zero cost energy future work effectively. The other parts I wanted to touch on too is we won't be successful if we don't push the boundaries on looking at different types of technology. And we've worked with a company called 1414 Degrees to install a new thermal storage system at our Glenelg wastewater treatment plant. So it uses silicon or molten silicon to store waste heat. So again, akin to a battery, but we're working very closely with 1414, and the results so far are very promising. We're also looking at a couple of sites where we're trialling water misting on our solar panels to improve the efficiency of electricity generation, and it sounds a bit of an oxymoron, I guess, to say we're a water utility who's trying to conserve water and we're spraying water over the top of solar panels, but it does work. It improves the efficiency of solar panels, so it is a technology that that we are looking at. Another interesting byline, I suppose, is some work we've done with the Adelaide Airport Corporation, where we've looked at irrigating parts with recycled stormwater, irrigating parts of the verge around the runways at Adelaide Airport. And what we've found is that by greening areas of the airport, the local microclimate actually reduces the temperature over the main airport building, and we've been able to show that there's a reduction in energy and air conditioning costs that the airport can actually achieve, and the net result is an overall reduction in energy costs for the airport and a better environmental outcome all round. So misting of water is something that my grandma used to do back in back a long time ago. Often spray the blinds out the front of the house when it got hot, because we didn't have air conditioning then, and the old is becoming new again. The next case study I wanted to talk about is our smart networks. We work in a regulated environment in South Australia. Essential Services Commission of South Australia is our economic regulator, and one of the things that we do to inform how we invest our customers' money is to ask them how they would like that money invested. And they were very clear when we spoke to our customers about the 5 key things that they expect from SA Water. Firstly, they expect safe, clean water. It goes without saying in a first world country. They want assurances on price and serviceability. They want water security that we've touched on before. And they want consistent high quality water, so water that's not only safe but tastes good to drink. But they also, the second most important behind safe water was minimal interruptions. So one of the things that we had noticed is that the central business district of Adelaide is an area that goes into, it's quite unique in the distribution system, and we had noticed that we were getting a significant increase in the number of water main failures that we had in the central business district. It was about double where it was in other parts of the state, and obviously that comes with a huge community exposure. It's the main part of the city. It's where most people work, or many people work. The SA Water building is located in Victoria Square, right in the middle, so we're quite high profile in the central business district. And the failures we were having were impacting our community. They were impacting our brand. They were impacting our reputation as an organisation. So we set about thinking about how we could do things differently to perhaps better manage that problem. So I'll go quickly to the next slide and then go back to that one. So what we did was we've installed what we call it was a trial initially. It's now been up and running for over 2 years. We installed a smart network system which had 11 mass flow meters around the outside of the city, a series of 100 smart meters on major customers. So most of the major multi-storey buildings in the CBD have now got smart meters on them. A series of 23 pressure transient hydrophones, 305 acoustic sensors. Now, to get the acoustic sensors in place, we actually had to create a baseline. So when we set the system up, we had people doing baseline noise detection across the city at about 3:30 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So it's actually quite interesting. There's some places in the city that we can actually hear people talk. So if you're walking around Adelaide, just remember that at some point in time, someone in our control room might be able to hear you. But there's 305 acoustic sensors, and there's 11 mass pressure sensors. So to go back to the slide before, what we did with all of that is we've connected all of those effectively through the Internet of Things. All of that information goes into a data storage and a data analytics analysis area, and it's those same smart people that were working on the data for Zero Cost Energy Future are also working on the data here to look at what all of that information starts to do and what trends start to project a water main failure. And so what we now have is a system in the Central Business District of Adelaide that actually gives us predictions of when our water mains are going to incur a problem. So what has that done for us? The upshot of all of that is that we're now at a position where we've been able to predict ahead of time about 50% of the water main failures that we experience in the CBD. And whilst that doesn't stop the main from failing, what it does do is allow us to fix those failures outside of normal business hours. So we minimise the impact to our customers, we minimise the exposure that we have as an organisation, and the really interesting part is that when we do our customer research and we ask customers about their perception of SA Water and what they want from us as an organisation, those that have heard about smart networks have a dramatically increased opinion of us as a utility. And we really do think that it is the way of the future. I've touched on most of those, and that's the result. So the next steps. We've currently trialling, we've expanded our smart networks in the Central Business District to North Adelaide, which is just obviously just to the north of the CBD. We're also expanded to look at sensors on major trunk systems so that we hope to be able to install predictive sensors on our major trunk mains on main arterial roads to minimise the impact to traffic. We're looking at improved pressure management and pressure modularisation, and we're expanding the use of smart meters that we have in our distribution system. What we've found is that whilst there's a benefit to the customer, particularly large use customers of smart meters, the information that we get in terms of time of water use and volume of water use at certain times gives us really good data to be able to better plan and manage our distribution system. And we've also started to look at smart networks on the wastewater side of things. We've installed a number of sewer overflow devices in high overflows areas and have had some really good results in predicting when an overflow is likely to occur and getting in and fixing it before there's a problem. So smart networks has been a success for us and something that's certainly improved our brand as an organisation. The last of the case studies that I wanted to touch on is what we call our distribution optimisation tool. And this diagram just gives you a summary. You don't need to look at the detail, but gives you a summary of our distribution system. The point that I wanted to make here is that we have 6 water treatment plants in Adelaide. We can supply water from the River Murray through 3 pipelines, or from our Adelaide Hills catchment areas through a number of dams in the Adelaide Hills, or through our desalination plant. And all of that is actually connected across the city by a system called our North-South Interconnector. The point being is that is a very large and very complex system to operate, and traditionally it was done on zones. So different parts of the city were supplied water from wherever their closest treatment plant was. What our distribution optimisation tools have enabled us to do is manage those conflicting factors. So the balance of natural inflows into reservoirs, unplanned outages, those peaks in electricity price that I was talking about before, Obviously, with $14 billion worth of assets, there's going to be planned maintenance work that needs to occur. So there's planned outages, changes in water quality, changes in demand, and obviously over time changes in infrastructure capacity. So the distribution optimisation tools really look at the cost of operating each of those systems, overlay that again with electricity prices, and it optimises the way we should operate our very complex system, and the way we should plan for operating it into the future. So in simple terms, maybe that the chart there's maybe not that simple, but it really takes the cost rate for operating a treatment plant and the volume of water that we need from that treatment plant, adds to that the electricity tariff and the electricity consumption that we plan, subtracts from that the feed-in tariff and the amount of generation that we or the amount of generation capacity that we have online at any one particular point in time, and does an optimisation. It does that on a daily, a weekly, a monthly, a quarterly, and a yearly basis. And it's actually the set of tools that we now use for our budgeting, and we manage our 27,000 kilometres across the state using these distribution optimisation tools. And once again, to go back to those smart people those young smart people who know how to use data science and data analytics in a much better way than I do, it's that information that they use with the software and the analytics that our operators run our system by. And that's an example of the type of charts and outputs that we use. So just to wrap up, as I've said a couple of times, all of that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have a really close connection with our supply chain, and if we didn't work across the various jurisdictions in Australia. I know through the Water Services Association of Australia, our utilities work very closely. We're pretty good at sharing information. And it really is an important platform that we have in South Australia. We are a small state by Australian standards, and we can't be successful if we don't work closely with our supply chain. I guess the message I wanted to, two messages I wanted to really leave with everybody is, firstly, that means as a state, as an industry, and as an organisation, we think we have knowledge that we're keen to share. And that we certainly are open for business. So those of you that have heard something today that you're interested in, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'm only too happy to put you in touch with the right people. We really are open for business as a state. We honestly believe that the more people in the industry we talk to, and the more that you share your knowledge with us and we share our knowledge with you, the better our chances of solving those considerable challenges that Art articulately elaborated on before. So we're open for business as a state, so please take me up on that offer. And that takes me to the plug for Ozwater 2020, which is in Adelaide in May next year. An ideal opportunity for you to come to the beautiful city of Adelaide and share some of those experiences. So thank you very much for your time today. Myself and Steve Morton and a number of others are around for the next couple of days. So if you want to grab a chance to have a chat, only too happy to do so. So thank you very much.
We do have time for a couple of questions. You guys live in the future. Fantastic.
Thank you, Mark. Jack Rositas, Veolia. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Really enjoyed that.
Thank you.
I had a question. You talked at length about the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. Yep. And how that's going to be tested again. I was curious, there was a picture of the Great Artesian Basin Plan up there. I didn't get any information about that. Maybe I didn't pick up on that. I'm just wondering what the status of that is. Is that a draft or is it operational?
It's certainly operational. I can't say whether it's still in draft, but it's certainly in place. So, our access to the Great Artesian Basin from a South Australian perspective is certainly managed very closely through the Department of Environment and Water in South Australia, who work very closely with the Commonwealth Government. So it's effectively managed through that group.
Further questions for Mark? Here we go.
Al LeBlanc from CDM Smith in the United States. Excellent presentation, thank you. You mentioned briefly your work with solar panels at some of your facilities. You mentioned a 5 or 6 year return on investment. In the US, people are very reluctant, it seems, at water plants to put in solar panels because it just doesn't pay quick enough. Was it driven by return on investment or other factors in your decision making?
Yeah, good question. It's very much driven by return on investment. So probably one of the differences, I guess, between South Australia and many parts of the US is that our electricity prices are quite high. I think we have close to the highest electricity prices in the world. So it is, it's very much driven by return on investment. But what we are also seeing is that as you make that step, the innovation does kick in, and you find cost-effective ways of managing your system differently. So, if we continue, that's the Einstein definition of insanity, isn't it? If you is continuing to do continuing to do something expecting a different outcome. I think as a society, I really expect to see a lot more of this. I mean, energy prices across the world are not going down. So there will be a kick-in point even in the US where solar and renewables more generally becomes cost-effective.
Going to lose out on all those flybys points though. $82 million. How do the electricity generators feel about that? Because $82 million out of their pocket,
Yeah,
that's got to be a bit of a hit.
It's probably the major disruptor in the Australian electricity market at the moment, and I think the National Electricity Regulator, AEMO, they're not quite sure how to handle all of this because we're not the only ones who are doing it. In fact, in terms of solar installations in South Australia, ours is about the third or fourth biggest that is on the go at the moment. The difference with ours is it's distributed over 70 sites and interconnected. All of the others are in one solar farm effectively. But yeah, it's a big challenge because in theory, if more and more organisations like ours move to more and more of their own generation, everybody else is still left with the residual asset base, and everybody else has to pay for it. So it is one of the challenges we had was more from an overall society perspective. So the net result of zero cost energy future for us is a reduction in the average customer bill of about $12 per year. It's gone up a little bit now. It's getting up closer to $20 per year. But does that flip around to an increase in electricity prices? So the customer, are they better off or worse off overall? The view we took is that our job as a water utility is to be the best that we can possibly be, and the electricity market will be the best that it can possibly be, and the net result should be the best for our customers overall.